There are people who believe that a strong mother is one who puts up with everything without complaining, who accepts her children's silence as if it were part of the motherhood package, who understands, forgives, comprehends, always. But no one tells us what happens when the silence goes on too long, when "I'll call you later" turns into never, when the promised hug never arrives, when the lunch prepared with such care ends up being served to only one person, and even the coffee gets cold faster. What no one has the courage to say is that behind many well-set tables on Mother's Day, there are women who stage a celebration so as not to break down. Women who pretend to be fine so as not to bother others. Who get ready, put on lipstick, put on a smile, and go home with their souls in tatters. She spent Mother's Day alone. That's right, completely alone. No phone calls, no voicemails, no flowers, notes, or unexpected visits. While social media was full of photos of families together, hearty meals and practiced smiles, she faced a kind of silence that echoes deeper than a scream. A silence that pokes, that hurts, that exposes what many people try to sweep under the rug. That motherly love does not always receive in return what it gives. And this feeling of invisibility hurts more than any harsh words. Because a mother does not expect expensive gifts, but rather a sincere presence. And when even that does not come, what is left? Before you think this is the drama of a needy mother or romanticizing abandonment, let's be serious. How many times have you said, "I'll call you later"? How many times have you chosen to please others and forgotten who held you in their arms when no one else would? The problem isn't forgetting the date. It's forgetting the importance of the person who was the foundation when you couldn't even walk properly. This story, which you're about to learn about, isn't just moving. It's a reminder, a mirror, an invitation. Because what happens when someone knocks on the door at the end of a day like this can change everything. And the question that remains is there still time to go back? To fulfill that childhood promise made between collages and colorful pasta? She discovered that there was. And maybe, when you see what happened to her, you'll also discover something that you've needed to remember for a long time. The morning dawned calmly, but there was something unsettling in the air. The sun poured its pale light through the cracks in the curtains, as if respecting the mourning of a silence that was not of death, but of absence. She woke to the sound of her own sigh. There were no footsteps running down the hallway, nor the clinking of hurried cups or voices fighting over the last piece of cake. It was Mother's Day, and the only sound that echoed through the house was the soft creaking of the wooden floor, as if even the house shared the loneliness. She got up slowly, as if she were in no hurry to find emptiness. She made coffee with experienced hands, but trembling with pent-up emotion. As she sat down, she looked at the empty chair in front of her. How many times had her small children perched there, with their faces smeared with dirt and eyes full of affection? Now, all that was left was the memory and longing squeezing her chest with invisible hands, bringing to the surface a feeling of loneliness that hurt more than the silence. The understanding of distance fought against the fear of indifference. There was still resilience in her gesture of preparing her own coffee, but also a silent compassion for herself, for that woman who had given so much and now faced absence as if it were a sentence. It was the beginning of a day that would require courage and a lot of hope. She tried to distract herself, moving objects on the counter, organizing the table that was already set only out of habit. Every detail of the environment seemed to conspire to accentuate the feeling of loneliness. The dishcloth embroidered with flowers, the photo frame without new photos, the calendar marking the day as if it were making a point of reminding her. And there, in that kitchen where so many stories had been told, she realized that the house, although alive in memories, was dead in presence. It wasn't anger that she felt. It was a kind of sadness that only those who have experienced the deep love of a mother can understand. A sadness that mixes gratitude for the memories and a suffocating insecurity about the future. She thought about calling someone but held back. The fear of seeming needy outweighed the desire to hear a voice. Oh, how a gesture of kindness is needed when the soul is fragile. But there was also a spark of humility there, because she knew that her pain was not unique, that many other mothers faced similar silences. Even so, at that moment, the world seemed too small to shelter so much emptiness. She stood up, took a deep breath, and tried to convince the mirror that everything was fine. A common practice for someone who learned to be strong even when her chest cried out for affection. Life had taught her to balance between hope and disappointment, between the sincerity of her feelings and the altruism of not demanding too much. There was a quiet wisdom in her way of being, shaped by the perseverance of so many battles won. She was not a weak woman, far from it. But at that moment, the absence of her children was a blow that hurt more than 1,000 words spoken in a harsh tone. It was as if every beat of her heart was asking for reconciliation with those who might not even know the impact of her absence. Still, she remained dignified, sustained by an almost stubborn confidence that something, somewhere, would change. She didn't know it yet, but this silent mourning was just the first act of a story that, even marked by loneliness, would still have room for the deepest commotion. It was curious how the human mind tries to find shelter in movement when the heart is restless. She got up from the table without an appetite and decided to clean the house, not out of necessity, but to try to silence the loneliness that screamed inside her. She started with the bookshelf in the living room, where the photo frames still held smiles from times that seemed as distant as old dreams. As she dusted one of them, a photo fell to the floor. Her, younger, surrounded by her 3 children, all wearing hand-painted t-shirts saying, "Mommy, our eternal love." She knelt to pick up the photo, and as she did so, her fingers touched the paper with an almost reverent delicacy. In that moment, it wasn't just an image. It was a window to a time when everything seemed simpler, where love was demonstrated, with crayons and sticky kisses. She felt a wave of compassion for that version of herself who, with so much hope, believed that that bond would never loosen. She continued her task as if searching for hidden treasure. At the bottom of a drawer, she found a stuffed envelope, drawings, crooked collages, sentences written in clumsy letters. "I love you, Mum, more than the sky," said one, while another promised, "I will never leave you alone." That cut her soul with the soft blade of longing. Each scribble was a declaration of raw, sincere affection, full of childlike sincerity. She smiled with tears in her eyes, touched by the kindness contained in each line, by the simple honesty of childish feelings. She felt invaded by a powerful mixture of gratitude and sadness, because it was impossible not to ask herself, where had those promises been hidden? How does one extinguish the brightness of a childhood so full of tenderness? And more than that, had she failed to keep that love alive? The answer did not come, but the emotion was clear. It took courage to revisit the past and not get lost in it. In the hallway, she passed the old bulletin board still stuck to the wall, where small yellowed notes stubbornly resisted the test of time. One of them said, "Good luck at the meeting, Mum. We love you." Signed with 3 drawn hearts. And there on that half-torn piece of paper, there was more humanity than in many elaborate speeches. She realized that those memories were not there by chance. It was as if the house itself was trying to remind her of who she was, of what she had built with so much selflessness and dedication. With each step, she felt the power of kindness of motherhood reborn within her, even though it was mixed with the fear of the indifference of today. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was also inspiration, because even in the face of pain, she knew that her story was not over. And perhaps, among the dust and the notes, there were clues about how to continue. But of course, there was also that inner voice that, whispering wisdom, reminded her of another promise, one made in an emotional tone on a distant Mother's Day, whose words would echo in the next room she cleaned. There was a kind of silence that was not just made of the absence of sounds, but of the suffocating presence of unspoken words. And as she arranged the notes in the box where she kept her memories, an old phrase returned to her memory with the force of an emotional thunder. "We'll never leave you alone on Mother's Day, Mommy." It was a promise made by children's voices, with the sincerity of those who believe that time changes nothing. But time, that cruel and wise old master, shows that even the most tender promises can fade in the rush of adult life. She sat on the edge of the bed and let her eyes wander to the ceiling, as if searching for answers between the cracks. And then came the most painful question of all. Where did I go wrong? Doubt throbbed, fueled by insecurity, by the fear of having loved too much or of having suffocated with care. But deep down, she knew. She had given everything she had. Each gesture, each sacrifice, each sleepless night was driven by a love that only grows, even without return. She mentally reviewed scenes from other times. The first Mother's Day when she received a handmade macaroni necklace. The second when they made her coffee in bed and burned the toast, but she ate it anyway, out of affection. The third when they hugged her so tightly that it hurt. And then she compared these memories with the present, where everything was marked by waiting and frustration. It was impossible not to feel a pang of injustice, of helplessness. Not that she demanded grand gestures. A message, a phone call, a flower plucked from the garden would be enough as before. But not even that was enough. Her heart, despite its resilience, gave itself completely and felt unprepared for this kind of involuntary abandonment. It took a generous dose of understanding to accept that her children's world now revolved in other orbits. But understanding did not eliminate the pain. It only taught her how to live with it. And it was there, in that whirlwind of emotions, that she realized how much a forgotten promise could weigh more than a cruel word. Still, she didn't want to hate. She didn't want to hold grudges. There was a continuous source of forgiveness and kindness within her, even though her chest was burning. She chose, once again, the path of empathy, and that required a monumental dose of humility. She knew that everyone had their struggles, their busy schedules, their priorities that changed over time. Maybe her children didn't even realize the hole they left. Maybe they didn't even know how invisible a mother can feel when all she wanted was an "I remembered you." But still she hoped. Because a mother's love doesn't demand, it gives itself. And even amidst silent tears, she felt strong. Because true strength lies in keeping your heart open, even after so many disappointments. And if they ever came back, and as she secretly dreamed, they would know that there would still be a lap, a smile, and a warm coffee waiting. But at that moment, what she didn't know yet was that the silence still had more evidence to present. Time that Sunday seemed to drag on with an almost cruel slowness. She had already swept the house, folded clothes that didn't need to be folded, and even watered the plants twice. Her cell phone was on the table, like a sleeping animal that she feared would wake up, but waited anxiously for. With each illusory vibration, her heart skipped a beat, as if it were a harbinger of reconnection. But nothing. No message, no silly emoji, no hurried audio with the voice of a beloved child. It was as if the world had forgotten that she existed, and the most painful thing wasn't the silence of the device. It was the absence of intention. Because where there is love, there is remembrance. Where there is gratitude, there is initiative. Sitting there, amidst notifications from useless apps, she felt the weight of loneliness fall on her shoulders with the force of accumulated longing. It wasn't drama, it was pain. A pain that mixed the fear of being forgotten and the most human of needs, to feel important to someone. Feeling a mixture of hope and despair, she opened her social media accounts. Maybe, she thought, they were all fine, they were just busy, but what she found was a punch in the gut. Smiling photos of her children with other people. One of them with his mother-in-law, another with his wife, another with friends at a lively lunch. Flowers, hugs, toasts, and in no caption, not even a mention of her. That was a harder blow than the silence, because the absence could be explained by distraction, but deliberate forgetfulness hurt the soul. Still, amidst the whirlwind, she tried to find understanding. Maybe they were trying to share their day to make the best of it. But once again, the absence of any gesture towards her screamed louder. It wasn't jealousy. It was a need for affection, a simple reminder that she was still a mother, still existed in the hearts that once lived inside her womb. She closed her phone with a heavy sigh, almost a lament. She got up from her chair like someone carrying the world on their shoulders, but without losing her dignity, because even in the deepest absences, she maintained the honesty of her feelings. She didn't pretend it didn't hurt. She knew that pretending wasn't a solution. It was just another layer of silence. But still, there was something inside her that refused to give in to bitterness. It was the perseverance of someone who built a family with her own hands, who went through feverish nights, who faced fears without ever breaking down in front of her children. It was this same strength that now kept her standing, even with her heart in pieces. And maybe, just maybe, there was still a turnaround waiting, something she couldn't yet see. Because, as life had taught her so many times, the biggest surprises usually come when hope is hanging by a thread. When the clock struck 3 in the afternoon, she stood up with determination. There was something theatrical in her gesture, as if she were putting a mask over her tired face. She opened her wardrobe and chose, without hesitation, her favorite dress, the light blue one that always drew compliments at family gatherings. She put on a discreet lipstick, carefully arranged her hair, and sprayed on a perfume that she saved for special occasions. It was her way of telling the world and herself that she was still there, whole. But inside that disguise was a heart that was bleeding softly. Even so, she dressed in courage and walked down the street with a firm posture, as if she wanted to convince others that everything was fine. Oh, how tiring it is to pretend to be light when your soul is in pieces. And even so, she smiled at her neighbors, greeted young people with kindness, stopped to admire shop windows as if time were on her side. At every corner, however, reality imposed itself with cruel delicacy. Children came out of flower shops with bouquets in their hands. Young people hugged their mothers in front of restaurants. Cars stopped, and entire families got out, laughing, taking selfies, celebrating together. It was beautiful to see, of course, but it was also painful. She didn't feel envy, because she cultivated a heart full of empathy, but she felt the absence throbbing. It was as if each display of affection from others was a reminder of something that had been denied to her that day. Even so, she kept walking. She didn't want to go home so soon. There was a mixture of sadness and resignation in the air, as if someone knew there was nothing much to do other than keep going. And paradoxically, that solitary walk also offered her moments of inspiration. Mothers with special children receiving tight hugs, embarrassed teenagers handing out flowers, elderly couples smiling next to their grandchildren. There, in the midst of that joy that was not hers, she found something greater, the wisdom that love can be observed even when it is not received. When she sat down on a bench in the square, she took a deep breath and let the sun touch her face. She stayed there, watching life go by, while she herself tried to reorganize herself inside. "I'm fine," she murmured to herself, a lie, loaded with emotional honesty. She wanted to believe that. She wanted, from the bottom of her heart, to feel that she didn't need to wait any longer. But the truth is that hope, even hurt, still lived inside her. She was stubborn, that hope. And perhaps it was precisely hope that drove her to leave the house, to smile, to try to appear fulfilled even when loneliness tightened her chest. On that bench, among flowers and the sound of hurried footsteps, she remembered something she always said to her children. Happiness is in the little things. She wanted to believe that again. After all, if love is made of simple gestures, perhaps a look, a touch, a word would be enough. And it was with this idea in her heart that she decided to return home. Little did she know that the silence that awaited her would bring with it something else, something that would change the course of that day. As she pushed open the gate to her house, she felt a shiver, not from the cold but from reality. The scent of the streets, the voices of families celebrating, the warmth of the sun. Everything was left behind as if in an interrupted dream. The key turned in the lock, with the slowness of someone who doesn't want to wake up the void. Upon entering, she was greeted by a thick, almost palpable silence. It was as if the walls were watching her, accomplices in the absence that hurt. So much. The switched-off television reflected her image in the black glass, a woman dressed for a party that never happened. She took off her shoes slowly, as if any noise could offend the stillness. She turned on the TV just to have company that doesn't respond, a sound that demands nothing. But neither the lights of the news nor the laughter of the soap operas could silence the silent cry of loneliness that inhabited her chest. There, between the sofa and the window, everything seemed colder than before. And yet, she tried to maintain her dignity. Because resilience also expresses itself in not breaking down, at least not in front of anyone. She sat in the armchair where she used to breastfeed her youngest child, and her thoughts began to swirl like dry leaves carried by the wind. Time, that invisible sculptor, had shaped her wrinkles, but it had also carved a fortress inside her. And yet at that moment even fortresses tremble. She wanted to call someone, a friend, a neighbor, anyone, but the inner voice whispered, "Don't seem weak." And this cruel and constant demand made her keep everything to herself. The pain, the fear, the insecurity. A woman who raised her children with such compassion, who taught them values such as kindness, honesty, and gratitude, now found herself alone, doubting her own importance. And that hurt her more than any badly spoken word. How could love, such a pure feeling, result in so much silence? Where were those spontaneous hugs, the drawings stuck on the fridge, the cutely misspelled phrases? She asked herself all this with teary eyes but her face impassive, because above all she was a mother. And mothers, even when they are afraid, still force themselves to be a shelter. Night fell slowly, and with it the weight of the day. She made some tea without wanting to, took a few sips and left the mug half empty. She looked out the window and saw the lights on in the neighboring houses. Inside, there was certainly laughter, stories being told, dishes being washed after a family lunch, and in hers, only the echo of footsteps, the hum of the television, the occasional creaking of the house. She went up to her room without much thought. Each step was like a drawn-out sigh. She took off her clothes slowly, washed her face with cold water, and looked at herself in the mirror once more. There she saw not only wrinkles but also the wisdom of someone who had lived an entire life for love, of someone who still carries hope, even though she is wounded. And although that day seemed to have come to an end, there was still a door, literal and metaphorical, that had not been knocked on. And deep down, even without knowing it, something inside her remained alert, as if one last event was yet to come. It was already dark when she decided to open the door to the only room that had remained intact over time. The doorknob turned gently, almost in reverence. The room, despite being clean, exuded memories. It belonged to her youngest son, who had left too soon, not by choice, but by one of those cruel coincidences in life that no one can explain. The smell still reminded her of youthful cologne, mixed with the perfume on her pillow, as if he would still appear at any moment, smiling, and saying, "Hi, Mom." She sat down on the edge of the bed carefully, as if visiting a sacred place. Her heart, already weakened by the absences of the day, could not resist. She cried, but it was a different kind of crying, deeper, full of compassion, longing, and love in its rawest form. That pain, as cruel as it was not like the others. It was not made of resentment or disappointment, but of a mourning that never completely heals. On the dresser were still displayed the trophies from the science fairs, the favorite books and the photo of the two of them, smiling side by side, as if time had frozen in that moment. She ran her fingers over the objects, as if trying to feel again the warmth of the hands that were no longer there. And there, in the silence of that room, she found a different kind of company. The pain of eternal absence was devastating, yes, but it brought with it something that other absences did. Not the certainty that there was love until the last second. There were no broken promises, no forgotten messages, just an early departure that had left deep scars. But even in that there was wisdom. She knew that mourning is also a form of love that refuses to die. And even among her tears, she found room for gratitude, for having lived such pure moments by his side. She remembered the times when he, even as a teenager, would leave notes saying, "You are the best mother in the world." And those moments, Simple words, but with a power of kindness that no gift could surpass. There, kneeling on the floor of her room, she prayed, not with memorized words, but with an open heart, in a gesture of humility and surrender. She asked for strength, comfort, peace, and most importantly, she asked that her children who were still alive remember her with the same love that her son had always shown. She knew that life is made of cycles and that pain, no matter how cruel it may be, also teaches us. It teaches us about empathy, about resilience, about the value of time and presence. And in that sacred moment, she felt something different, a gentle warmth in her chest, a kind of inner reconciliation, as if her son were silently telling her, "I am here." With her eyes still full of tears, she slowly closed the door. Little did she know that down there something was about to happen, because sometimes when pain reaches its peak, it is a sign that life is about to surprise us. Walking down the stairs with slow steps, her body felt tired, as if each thought weighed more than the day itself. The night was dark, and the silence had returned like an old acquaintance. She turned on a soft light in the living room and sat down again, without much purpose. She closed her eyes for a moment, perhaps in search of peace, perhaps trying to numb her soul. It was then that she heard, knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks, dry, almost timid. Her heart skipped a beat, not from fright, but from something close, to insecurity mixed with hope. Who could it be at that hour? She stood up slowly, her eyes fixed on the door as if she herself could answer. The sound of the knocks echoed like an invitation to leave her own suffering. With a mixture of alertness and confidence, she approached. She took a deep breath before turning the doorknob, unaware that on the other side, something much greater than a visitor awaited her. When she opened the door, she found a young man wearing a hoodie with a serene and kind expression. He was holding a brown envelope with his name handwritten on it. "Good evening, ma'am. I was asked to deliver this to you in person." The young man's voice was polite, almost affectionate. She took the envelope with a slight tremor in her fingers, as if she were receiving a letter sent from the past. Before she could ask more, he simply smiled and said, "Enjoy reading." And he left, leaving an aura of mystery in the air that mixed with the scent of the night. He closed the door slowly, looking at the envelope as if it were a sacred artifact. She returned to the armchair with her heart racing. The handwriting, she recognized it. It was his youngest son, the one who had moved to another country in search of his dreams and who had not been heard from for months. A sea of emotions came to the surface, from joy to compassion, passing through gratitude and relief. But there was more there. Intuition, almost a certainty, that the envelope was more than a letter. It was a bridge. With trembling fingers and teary eyes, she carefully tore open the seal. Each second seemed eternal. The paper was simple, but the writing carried life, memory, presence. The first line made her chest tighten. "Mom, I know today is hard." And there, before she could even continue reading, she broke down. It wasn't just about being remembered, it was about being seen, about someone miles away, understanding her pain and doing something about it. That, in itself, was an act of love, of altruism, of true connection. She dried her eyes and continued reading, never imagining that what would come next would change not only that night, but her very notion of presence. Because, as she read, she barely noticed that outside the young man in the hood hadn't left yet. And life silently prepared the ground for one of the most moving reunions in its history. The letter was a warm breath on a cold day, the kind that warms you from the inside out. She held it carefully, as if it could melt between her fingers. "Mom, forgive me for my silence. Forgive me for seeming distant. I never forgot you. Not for a second." With each line, her heart seemed to revive. "Today I understand things that I couldn't before. I understand your strength, your patience, your dedication. It was your silent compassion, your daily perseverance, and your gentle way of loving that shaped me." The tears this time didn't come from loneliness, but from something greater, recognition. With teary eyes, she continued reading. "He said that time had been cruel, but that the love he felt for her was greater than any jet lag or busy routine. And then came the sentence that stopped everything around her. "Today, Mom, is the day we fulfill our promise, the one we made when we were still little." She choked on air, trying to understand. What did he mean by that? She continued reading. "I know you spent the day waiting, and I want you to know that we remember too, all of us." Her heart raced. "I know the silence on our cell phones hurt more than any absence, but the truth is that we wanted to surprise you." A shiver ran through her entire body. "Finish reading this letter and open the door, please." With trembling hands, she got up from the armchair, as if walking between a dream and reality. She took slow steps towards the door, not knowing whether to laugh, cry, or pray. She turned the doorknob. And there, in front of her, was not just her youngest son with his eyes shining and a shy smile. Beside him were the other two, the three of them, together. The boys from her childhood, now men but still her sons, all smiling with flowers in their hands, as if time had finally learned to fulfill promises. She put her hand to her mouth as if trying to contain her emotion, but it was too late. The tears came like good rain on dry land. They didn't say anything right away. They just hugged her, one on each side, like they used to do when they were little. It was a hug that mixed forgiveness, gratitude, affection, honesty, and a love that neither time nor distance nor mistakes could erase. "We remembered, Mom, and we came, as we promised." She sobbed with emotion, but it was a sweet sob of relief, of reconnection. It was the realization of what she had nurtured with so much altruism throughout her life. A family that, even when far apart, still knew how to find its way back. And there, in that collective hug, the pain of the entire day dissipated. The night, previously dark, gained new colors, because true reunion is not always about physical presence, but about emotional presence. And that night, for the first time in a long time, she felt whole. With her eyes still full of tears and her arms around her children, she felt time stop. It was as if the entire universe had paused to witness that moment. The hug was long, silent, and said everything that words could not. And in the midst of that human warmth, she felt something she had not felt for a long time: security, as if she was finally home, even though she had never left it. Her youngest son, with a choked voice, whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." The other two repeated the gesture, but she did not let the guilt take over. She hugged them tighter and answered with a firm but sweet voice, "There is nothing to forgive when love is greater than any absence." There, between tears and smiles, she looked at them one by one as if she wanted to immortalize that moment. There was affection, there was hope, there was reconciliation. It was living proof that no distance is greater than the power of truth and kindness. The room, previously silent, was now filled with voices, laughter and stories, gifts and surprises. They sat together on the couch, just like in the old days. She brought out the photo album, the one she kept at the bottom of the drawer. Each page turned was accompanied by exclamations, memories and spontaneous hugs. One of them told how he learned to cook a recipe she loved. Another showed photos of the grandchildren she had not yet met. And the youngest, the one who had sent the letter, revealed that he intended to spend some time in the country close to her. It was as if life, tired of postponing reunions, had decided to reward her all at once. The gratitude she felt overflowed from her eyes, her hands, her smile. Nothing there was superficial. Everything was real, sincere, deep. The kind of love that is built with resilience, with dedication, with humility. And in that reunion, more than words, there was an undeniable truth. A mother is never forgotten. Sometimes she is only postponed. Later, when the house was full again, she made coffee, as she used to do when they were school. The table was filled with delicious treats, simple cake and fresh memories. They all sat down, as before. The chair that had been empty in the morning now welcomed her oldest son, the middle one and the youngest. Each place was taken like a puzzle that fits together after a long time. She observed everything in silence, feeling part of a discreet miracle. "You've grown up," she said, her voice breaking. "But for me, you're still my boys." They smiled. And in that moment, there was no more room for fear, loneliness, or doubt. What existed was love, trust, and the inspiration of knowing that despite everything, there is always time to come back. And if by chance anyone still doubted the power of kindness, there was living proof. A woman who loved in silence and was loved back when she least expected it. And the day, which began with absence, now ended full of presence, true, whole, transformative. So tell me, how many times have you failed to knock on someone's door when they were just waiting for a sign from you? How many mothers, fathers, grandparents, people who loved you with everything, were left staring at their cell phones like she was waiting for a hello? The truth is that life doesn't owe us anything, but we owe a lot to those who gave us everything. This story isn't just about a woman and her children. It's about all of us, about the times when we exchange presents for urgency, affection for obligation, love for distraction. And look, there's still time to change that. How many more silences are you going to wait until you take the initiative to come back? Are you going to keep putting off that phone call that could bring a sincere smile to someone's face? Or are you going to decide today that certain presences can no longer be put off? You have a real chance to change the story of someone who loves you, and maybe change yours too, because those who have an open heart to forgive, love, listen, and reconnect discover a strength that loneliness will never be able to destroy. If this story touched you, then it's time to take action. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and take advantage. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay tuned. Here, we talk about what really matters, about feelings, reconnections, the power of kindness, and the small actions that transform the world, starting with our own hearts. So tell me, who will be the first person you call today?